Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you this morning for this very important conference, but I'm very pleased to be here, at least virtually, and to talk to you. As I think you all know, food security is one of the great issues in the world today. There are over 1 billion people who are hungry in the world, and this conference is important in the sense that if you come to the right conclusions, the number of hungry people will decrease, but if you get it wrong, the number of hungry people will increase. In the early 1960s, I was the government entomologist in North Borneo, the state of Sabah. And when I first arrived there, I was told I had to go and deal with all the pests on cocoa, which was being grown down in the southeast of the country. When I went there, I was horrified to see that all the trees were bare of leaves, and there were thousands, if not millions, of pests devouring the cocoa leaves and pods and branches. I asked the farmers, the cocoa growers, what they were doing, and they said, we are spraying with pesticides. We have at least a dozen different pesticides we're using, and sometimes we use them in cocktails. We're working very hard to control all these pests. But it seemed to me that this was probably the wrong approach. The cocoa was being grown next to the primary forest, and in many instances had many of the original trees growing above the cocoa. And it seemed to me that it was possible that the pests of cocoa were actually being attacked by natural enemies, by parasites or predators, and that the problem was that the pesticides were killing the parasites and predators, and that's why the pests had exploded. So I thought what we should do was stop spraying. But you have to remember, I was only about 22 at the time, and all these cocoa farmers thought I didn't know what I was doing, said I was young and needed to grow up and learn what to do. But fortunately, my director, the Director of Agriculture, backed me up, and he said, yes, we're going to stop all the spraying. And so he directed everybody to simply stop spraying. And after 6 months, most of the pests came under control. There was just one that wouldn't, and for that we chose a very targeted, selective insecticide, and we used that for another 6 months, and eventually that came under control. This was the first integrated pest management program to be put in practice outside of California or Peru, where this concept had been developed some 5 or 6 years earlier. It lasted right through to recent years and was highly successful. After I'd done this work, I went to visit the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines to see what they were doing. And I was horrified to see that they were literally covering the fields with insecticide. They had cans of insecticide where the water flowed from one field to another. So the insecticide just swept right across the rice fields. They were using insecticides prophylactically. And I said to them, this is extremely hazardous. You're going to end up with big pest problems. And they said, no, I don't think that'll happen. Well, of course, that is exactly what happened. In the 1970s, a pest known as a brown planthopper exploded on rice in Southeast Asia. It was particularly severe in Indonesia, and there was indeed over $1 billion worth of damage being caused each year by the brown planthopper. Once again, the problem was that there was spraying prophylactically with broad-spectrum pesticides on the fields in Indonesia. But along came a scientist, Peter Kenmore, who's in fact speaking this morning, And he and other colleagues did some brilliant research. And they showed that the brown planthopper was normally controlled by parasites and by predators, in particular by a wolf spider. And they suggested, again, that if we stopped spraying, then the pests would come under natural control and not be so serious a problem. And what they did was to start to train farmers in how to recognise not just the brown planthopper, but also the wolf spiders and other parasites. And the farmers were encouraged to go into the fields and count the number of brown planthoppers and count the number of parasites and wolf spiders. And if they met a certain threshold, then they could spray, but with a selective targeted pesticide. And this is what they did. They learnt about this at farmer field schools. These are simple teaching situations in which farmers learn about the pests and the parasites and the wolf spiders and how to produce an integrated pest management program. Each one of those schools cost only about $500, and in more recent years, the farmers have been paying for them themselves. Alongside this, the government of Indonesia banned 57 broad-spectrum pesticides. It was a very courageous step. And integrated pest management then became a reality in Indonesia and in fact spread throughout most of Southeast and South Asia. What is happening now? We've seen once again outbreaks of planthoppers beginning in about 2004. They've been particularly serious in Vietnam and China. And once again, we're seeing large-scale use of prophylactic pesticides, broad-spectrum pesticides. And it seems that the old story is being repeated. The problem is we don't seem to learn from the past. But we also succumb to all kinds of commercial and other pressures. One of the problems is that you don't make a lot of money by selling rice seed, even the new hybrid rices that come from China, but you make a lot of money if you sell pesticides. And so the rice seed and the pesticides are combined together in a single package, which are then sold to farmers. It is, I think, right to say this is a deadly package. The outbreaks in the 1960s and 70s were the consequence in part of the Green Revolution. But the Green Revolution was also the place where, and the situation where people found the answer to the brown planthopper. And the reason is support for scientists, support for research. A great deal of money went into investment and research, and whenever there was a big problem like this brown planthopper problem, money was put into doing the right kind of research. There was also, and this is absolutely crucial, good governance. There was strong political leadership. Political leaders who listened to scientists, who were not swayed by commercial pressures, who were willing to accept the results of research and to produce policies based on that kind of research. And it's exactly this that we need today. We need good research. We need to find out exactly what is going on today. We need to find good, ecologically sensitive methods of pest control that will work, that will minimize the use of pesticides, maximize the use of natural enemies. We have to find systems of control which will not only control the brown planthopper and the other planthoppers, but will minimize the creation of upset pests, minimize resistance, and not cause any environmental pollution. It's a tall order, but I know we can do it. You have in the conference today a lot of very bright minds, a lot of very experienced people, and a lot of people with strong political influence. And I hope that you will all be able to come together to find a lasting solution to our current problems. Thank you very much for listening to me.